Okay, good afternoon to all. See, there are only 12 participants. Is the video here ready? Can you please check attendance? Uh, Open your cameras, please. 15 minutes grace period for half a cup. Then after full cup. Please take a screenshot, Mr. Video, so
Okay
you
po, sir.
can take note of the attendance quickly. So we 13 are here. There's 21 of you. And fortunately, last Friday was sudden announcement regarding the shift of modality to online. And though I wanted to really have an online class at that time, but circumstances and environment were not conducive. For one, my co-teacher was having was going to have his pastoral class online as well. It's just beside my table. So also, I reckon that the students won't have that mindset, and some of them may already be on their way home. So I just assigned the uh, topic, Friday's topic for asynchronous study, which uh, is on the consequences of the completeness action. And I hope you did study the topic and what is it or they basically about. What are these consequences? What's the completeness action? Tells us that the real line has no holes. It's complete. Okay. So that between, or rather, sorry, I'm thinking way ahead of the consequences. Every subset, remember, that is bounded above, every subset or any subset of the set of real numbers that is bounded above as what? That's the action, a supremum, or in plainer terms, a least upper bound. Why is that not true of Q? Set of all rational numbers. Every set S, okay, that is a subset of the set of real numbers. Okay, that is bounded. So S is a bounded set, say above. Then this implies S has a lower bound or a least upper bound, sorry. The supremum of S exists. Okay? But this is not true if you replace R by Q. Why? Anyone? Then unmute your microphone or send a message. Yes. Mr. Gandesa?
Yes, sir. Sir, I think we can use a counter sample of the set x is in Q, where x squared is less than 2. So actually the bound of this set is square root of 2, but square root of 2 is not in Q.
Okay, so that's considered for recitation. Now this one here, if you consider this set S, okay, if we consider it as a subset of Q, okay, its supremum won't exist. It's bounded above, right? It's bounded by 2, right? It's bounded by any number between square root of 2 and 2. So that square root of 2 is the only possible supremum of it. The least upper bound is square root of 2, right? However, the problem is when considered in the ordered field Q, the supremum does not exist there. There's no square root of 2 in Q. It's unknown. It's not a number that the set Q is familiar with. It's a stranger to it. It's out of its world. There's no square root of 2 there. So its supremum, the supremum of S does not exist there. Meaning, geometrically, thus a set of rational numbers has a whole, although it's also an ordered field. Problem is, it doesn't satisfy the completeness axiom, which is this one, okay? The completeness axiom states that every set, okay, in the field that has an upper bound must have a least upper bound. If that axiom is true for the field, then the field is defined to be or said to be complete. So that it's a complete ordered field. Now changing the field to R, okay, square root of 2 is an element of R. We know that actually already in high school or elementary. But since, okay, we assume the completeness axiom for this field R, then automatically by the axiom, square root of 2 must be in R. Actually, this could be circular, but really, uh, we're, right, if you remember, we reconstructed the set of real numbers using the field axioms, the order axioms, and then finally the completeness axiom. And then we use the completeness axiom to assert or to claim that square root of 2 is in R. And we just simply use the action to prove it. As suggested, we consider S, right? Let S be the set of all numbers in R satisfying the inequality, the condition there, x squared less than 2. Now, this set has an upper bound in R, right? You can give 2. Definitely, you know that 2 is a real number. Well, of course, any rational number is also a real number. But there are other numbers that we may not be familiar with yet, but are there. So for instance, squaring a number, we are familiar with squaring fractions, squaring integers, but how about numbers that do not seem to have a square root, right? In elementary and high school, or in elementary, we know how to find a number whose square is 4. Or in high school, a number whose square is 9/4. But when confronted with this, can you think of a number whose square is 2? Well, no matter uh, how many times a high school student tries to find one, he can't seem to get 2 as its square exactly, right? And that's when the student in high school discovers, or as they are taught, right, or he is taught, that there are what we call numbers that cannot be expressed as a ratio of two integers. Now, using the completeness action, one can assert that square root of 2, this number here, is actually part. Okay, it's part of the field of real numbers. And that's by taking a subset, showing that it's bounded. In fact, it's bounded by 2 or 3 or 10 or whatever number is greater than those. And then using the action to state that this one, or to claim that this one has a supremum. Okay? And the supremum exists by the completeness action. And since it exists in R, that supremum is a number in R. And in fact, we denote the number to be the square root of 2, right? That's how we define the square root. We mean square root of A if and only if, okay, we say that the square root of A is B if, okay, we're talking about positive numbers here only, if the square of A is B. If the square of A is B, then we define the square root of A to be that positive number B. Okay? Or sorry, square root of A equals B, A equals B squared. Okay? So that means there exists a number whose square is 2. We don't know it yet, but we know it exists now in the field, complete ordered field of the set of real numbers. So remember, we started with constructing it. We do not assume it yet, right? But of course, doing it the other way around, we could actually exhibit this one as a counterexample to Q being not complete. And the first consequence is the Archimedean property. We won't have time to discuss this now because this was supposed to be for last Friday. So if we have time, then maybe okay, we can go back to the proof of this. But there are several ways to state the Archimedean property. One is the one given by French, and some books just simply state it this way. It's the simpler version, but equivalent version of the other statement. Okay, the Archimedean property simply states that the set of natural numbers n is not bounded above in the field R, which we just constructed. The set of natural numbers being, of course, 1, 2, 3, and so on. And as consequence, this means that for any epsilon greater than 0, there's always a fraction, okay, that is positive less than epsilon. Okay, that's the first consequence of the Archimedean property. No matter how small epsilon is, you can always find a rational number there. Or rather, or uh, exactly, rather exactly, there exists a natural number n such that 1 over n is small enough. Okay, 1 over n is smaller than epsilon. Now, this is obvious, of course, if you're coming from like the R the set of real numbers itself as presented in high school algebra and arithmetic, right? But remember here, we're trying to prove it. Okay, trying to prove it. We constructed the ordered field R, and we proved the Archimedean property, this one here. And as a consequence of the Archimedean property, we can prove that no matter how small a positive number is, there is a fraction smaller than it, particularly the reciprocal of a natural number. You can find a natural number big enough so that its reciprocal is small enough, smaller than any epsilon we fix. Okay, you give an epsilon, I can always find a natural number whose reciprocal is smaller than that. And that is proven using the Archimedean property. I hope you have read the proof. And then the density of rational numbers follows. Okay. The proof, I hope you've also read. We won't show the proof here now, but I'll quickly discuss the proof for irrational numbers density using this fact or this theorem. It states that any two real numbers, the density of rational numbers states that any two real numbers, whether they are rational or not, you can always find a rational number in between, strictly in between, greater than A, less than B. And that seems to be, of course, obvious to us coming from the uh, subject of high school algebra and arithmetic, right? But coming from real analysis where we have to formally construct the ordered field R, this is not so obvious, and the proof could be quite difficult to understand. Okay, so please read the proof. So given that these are established, okay, we can prove the density of irrationals. So same thing, given any two real numbers, we can prove now, okay, having established all the axioms and the Archimedean property and the density of rational numbers, we can now prove the density of irrationals, meaning there is always an irrational number in between any two real numbers. That's what the theorem says. So if A and B are element of R with A less than B, there exists an irrational number x in R less Q or minus Q. What does that mean? It's the set of real numbers. You remove the set of Q, the set Q rational numbers. So this actually is just the set of irrational numbers. It's the complement of Q. And there exists such x in R minus Q or Q complement such that x is strictly greater than A, less than B. Let's just quickly show the proof. Okay, we will use the previous result. Okay, Trench actually proves it differently. You have to read the proof of Trench also. But this one makes use of the previous result, the density of rationals. So let's start. So we know that square root of 2 is positive, okay? By definition, okay, actually, we have square root of 2 strictly positive so that the negative or the additive inverse is denoted by putting the minus sign before it, okay? So square root of 2 is strictly greater than 0. And what we do is, so we have A less than B. So we divide both A and B, right? So we divide A by square root of 2. We divide B by square root of 2. So we still have the original direction of the inequality preserved. Now, remember the density of rationals. What does it say? Okay, that between any two real numbers, there is always a rational number. So that means there's a rational number in between these two numbers. Take note, these two numbers don't have to be rational also. They just have to be real numbers. A and B are real numbers, so these two are also real numbers. And by the density of rationals, there must be also a rational number, okay? A rational number between the two, okay? Between them, strictly, Q. There is a Q, rational number, between the two. That's by the density of rational numbers. And now we can find that number between A and B. That is rational, okay? Or rather, that is irrational. We simply multiply by yes, Mr. Rivera, that's considered recitation. You're the first one to send me an answer. Square root of 2. And what is the effect of multiplying that or everything by square root of 2? Well, first, the numbers on the extreme left and right become A and B. But moreover, the number in between becomes what kind of a number? An irrational. Okay, we started with that. We multiply by square root of 2. We get this inequality. You multiply this by square root of 2. And we have the A and B, which we wanted, right? We wanted to find a real number between A and B, or an irrational number between A and B. And what we got here is actually an irrational number. And why is it an irrational number? Because square root of 2 is, we've proven this before, an irrational. And we assumed Q, okay, to be rational. A rational times an irrational can be proven, okay? But we will assume it. A rational number times an irrational number is still an irrational number. In other words, this is an irrational number and it is strictly between A and B. And we have just proven the theorem. Okay, any question? Please read the proof of French also. It's direct. So that's how you learn real analysis. Okay, we do very analytical things here. We analyze the real numbers. That's why it's called real analysis. So now we move on to the next topic, okay? 1.3 of Trench, according to the syllabus. We've just finished 1.1 of Trench, which should have been last Friday's, right? Topic. So let's recap. In our first three meetings, we established the real numbers algebraically. Okay? We used algebra to reconstruct the real numbers. So we use what? A set of axioms. Namely, there are three axioms: field axioms, order axioms, and finally, completeness axiom, to be able to construct a complete ordered field, which is actually up. And we stated last time that any other complete ordered field is just what? A carbon copy, a clone, or in mathematical terms, isomorphic to R. They may have different elements, but geometrically and algebraically, they have uh, similar properties. They look the same, okay, apart from the elements. Apart from the nature of the elements, okay, they are uh, the same. Okay, they are equivalent to each other. So now we move on. Having established the real line, we are now ready to study it. Okay, that's mathematics. You can't study something that is not yet been established. You begin with what? When you construct a house, you begin with the foundation. Once you have established the foundation, then you can build upon it or on it. So let's go now to the geography, or rather, mathematically, the topology of the real line. Okay, so let's start with uh, open sets, closed sets, and we need those in order to have a concept of closeness. Okay, what is closeness? Okay, we constructed the real line algebraically. So we have elements there on it, in it. How do we know if two elements there are close to each other? How do we tell if they are this close? Okay? Or whether this one is closer than this one to a particular point. So we need a mathematical definition of closeness. So that when we study limits, right? Remember limits in calculus? Approaching. So we can define it uh, analytically or mathematically, what it means for a variable x to approach a real number a. Okay, so we begin by defining several kinds of sets. Let's begin by defining what we call a neighborhood, or more uh, particularly an epsilon neighbor. Okay, an epsilon neighborhood. So you start with a point. Okay, so you have a real number. Call it x naught. Now, what is an epsilon neighborhood? An epsilon neighborhood is simply the set of all points that lie at a distance epsilon from x naught. In other words, it's just the interval x naught minus epsilon, x naught plus epsilon. All numbers whose distance from x naught, okay, is at most epsilon is defined to be the epsilon neighborhood. However, of course, since we haven't technically defined distance yet, right? So instead of using the distance formula or definition to be the absolute value, okay, we can just use, okay, what we have, like addition and subtraction. And subtraction is essentially just addition, right? Addition of the inverse. So if we have two real numbers now, okay, say x naught and epsilon, we define, okay, the epsilon neighborhood to be this interval here. All numbers that are contained inside it. Remember, it's an ordered field, right? So there is order to it now. So some numbers are less than other numbers, and there's a flow, there's an order that is followed. So all numbers that lie between x naught plus epsilon and x naught minus epsilon, strictly, okay, not including the endpoints, are part of this epsilon neighborhood. And the epsilon neighborhood is noted by the symbol here. Okay. Now, what is a deleted epsilon neighborhood? we just remove the center. Okay, x naught. It's just actually okay. We've used the symbol anyway, so it's just actually obtained by adding greater than 0. What does adding that condition there greater than 0 do? It tells us the distance cannot be 0. So it cannot be the point itself. And this will be important later when we define limit points. But in other words, it's just the same interval with a hole right at the center x naught. So having defined neighborhoods, epsilon neighborhoods, we can now define the following: interior points and exterior points. So consider any subset of R now. An interior point of S, say x naught, is any point that contains, or rather, that has an epsilon neighborhood that is contained in S. Okay? So here's the graphical visualization. You have the set S. It's not necessarily an interval, by the way. The set is just a subset of R. So what do you mean by an interior point of it? You have to be able to construct an epsilon neighborhood of x naught. Okay, this is x naught. Oh, sorry, or somewhere there. So yeah, this one here. Sorry, this is x naught. So it's an interior point if you can draw an epsilon neighborhood. Okay, epsilon can be like changed. You can oscillate its value, make it small enough. If you can find such an epsilon neighborhood that is small enough to fit inside the set, then we call that point an interior point. You just need one neighborhood. In fact, if there's one neighborhood, there are infinitely many such neighborhoods. You just make epsilon not smaller or epsilon smaller. Okay? Now, if that is an interior point, what is an exterior point? An exterior point, okay, is outside the set, but not quite just that, because there are boundary points. But for it to be totally outside the set, for it to be an exterior point, you can draw an epsilon neighborhood that lies outside S. It's strictly outside the set, unlike this one. Okay, sorry for that. Ain't working. Okay, there. So for an interior point, the epsilon neighborhood must lie inside the set. For an exterior point, it must lie totally outside, entirely outside the set, meaning in the complement. Remember, the complement is just the set of real numbers minus the set. Anything outside S is part of the complement. So if the epsilon neighborhood lies outside the set, it lies inside the complement. If you can find just one such epsilon neighborhood, then you consider that point to be exterior to the set, or an exterior point of the set. Now, what is a boundary point? So ito yung parang nakagitna no, sa interior, exterior. So sometimes it's called the skin of the set. Okay? So it's a boundary point if every neighborhood of it contains a point in S, at least one, okay? And a point not in S. So here's the illustration. So consider this set S here. Now let's look at this point here, which is actually a boundary point. Draw any epsilon neighborhood. Okay, it has to be true for every epsilon neighborhood. Okay, if every such neighborhood contains a point in S and a point outside S, then it's a boundary point. Ay, hindi lang natin dinedefine as yung dulo. Okay, or yung boundary. But how do you precisely determine if it's in the boundary or a boundary point? Then you have to actually come up with a definition like this using neighborhoods. Okay, it's neighborhoods that we use to define exterior, interior, and boundary points. So kapag interior, there's at least one neighborhood inside the set. If exterior point, at least one neighborhood of X naught outside the set. If boundary, every neighborhood of it contains a point inside the set and at the same time, at least one point outside the set. That's boundary point. Any question? Now, what's an isolated point? Right there in the figure. Okay, our set may not have isolated points, but usually there happens to be isolated points when we simply like add single or a finite number of points to a set that is continuous or like an open interval. So like, see the set S, the one colored blue. This is set S, including the endpoints there, or rather boundary points. This point here, just a singular point, a singleton. It's an isolated point. It's isolated from the others. And the way we define an isolated point, again, in real analysis, is by way of neighborhoods. If you can surround it, okay, by at least one neighborhood, and this neighborhood does not contain any other point of S, the set S, then that point is considered an isolated point. Okay, it's just one that you need for it to be isolated. Any question? None? So let's go to limit points, or sometimes it's called accumulation points when you're talking of just a set, and limit points when you're talking of sequences. So the more accurate word actually here is accumulation point or points. But nevertheless, we will use the two synonymously. In fact, they are just equivalent. So what is an accumulation or limit point? So X naught, again, is considered a limit point of the set S if every deleted neighborhood of it, okay, X naught, contains a point of S. Okay, teka sir. Parang interior point din siya, no? Okay. Well, in fact, an interior point is a limit point. But not all limit points are interior points. Okay? And why did we use deleted neighborhood, not just neighborhood? Because X naught, okay, could be in S. So the definition won't make any meaning at all. Okay? Every point would be a limit point. So if we don't use deleted neighborhoods, then even this isolated point is a limit point. Why? Because it is part of the set. So we have to use deleted points, meaning it has to contain another point of the set, but not the same point X naught, other than X naught. Now, in terms of sequences, actually, you can find a sequence that converges to it. But since this point is isolated, it is not really a limit point. So another way to define a limit point is every neighborhood, okay, can remove this part. If every neighborhood of X naught contains a point of S other than X naught, okay? Or to make it simpler, we can just define the concept nga ng deleted neighborhood. So if every deleted neighborhood of X naught, meaning not including X naught, contains a point of S, then it's a limit point. No matter how small that neighborhood is, there should always be a point of S inside that neighborhood apart or other than X naught. So since we're used to thinking of intervals, so to see the difference, let's use a set that is not an interval. Consider the set of all reciprocals of natural numbers, or 1, 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, so on, so forth. So this is a subset of R. Now, let's find the limit points, if there are any at all. In fact, 0 is a limit point, and it's the only limit point. Why is it a limit point of S? Anyone can answer that? Unmute your mic if you want to answer for recitation. And please read and note those who recited, okay? Any neighborhood of 0, not quite. I need you to answer with your microphone unmuted, not just typing, to clarify things.
Oh, for my attempt,
Who
any
is this?
Mr. Gandesa, sir.
Mr. Candesa again? You recited a while ago, right?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay, sige, I'll give you another.
Um,
Okay, continue.
I'll go ahead. I tried to say that any epsilon neighborhood of 0 has an element in S, but 0 is not in S itself. So, hold on. The epsilon that would be in this case is the 1 over n, where n is a natural number. But does epsilon neighborhood, but the given epsilon neighborhoods of 0 does not have the point 0 itself is not in S.
Okay, but okay, thank you very much. But the thing is, it does not have to be a point in the set. A limit point may not be part of the set. It could be, but it does not have to, as long as every neighborhood contains a point of S. Okay, we stated the Archimedean property, right? So 1 over n. N is natural. This is 0. It's not part of the set. So anyway, it's a different color. Indicate that. So rather, those points that are colored so 1 is in the set, 1/2 is in the set, 1/4, right? And so on. 1/3, sorry. So 1, 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, 1/5. So anyway, so on and so forth, right? But not 0. So you see, it's obvious to see that it's clear to see that we can clearly see that there are points accumulating, okay, near the origin. We can consider the sequence itself, and the sequence 1, 1/2, 1/3 actually converges to 0. So it's a limit point. But using the definition of epsilon neighborhoods, if you draw any neighborhood, it's intuitive, okay, that there are points inside this neighborhood, points of S, right? Because of the 1 over n. And that 1 over n is familiar, right? We have just stated the Archimedean property. We have just proven that 1 over n can be made to be smaller. So that if this is your epsilon, right? You draw any epsilon neighborhood around 0, although there are other points to the left of 0. But due to the Archimedean property, we can prove that there must be a 1 over n small enough to be inside the epsilon neighborhood. Okay, no matter how small your epsilon is, you can always find a 1 over n there. And that 1 over n is a part of S, an element of S. Meaning then that what? 0 is a limit or accumulation point. Okay. Okay, commercial. Oops. 21 for that. So let's go back. So we are here. Times. Bear with me. So 0 is a limit point of S because every deleted epsilon neighborhood of 0, negative epsilon to 0, union 0 to epsilon, has a 1 over n. Well, of course, this part does not have any element of S, right? Because this consists of negative numbers. But this part has. Deleted because 0 is not part of it. So no matter how small the epsilon is, there is a natural number such that this is true. Thus, every deleted neighborhood of 0 has a point of S. Okay? Anyway, again, as mentioned, a limit point does not need to be in the set. Take note, 0 is not an element, but it's a what? An accumulation or limit point. Now, how about the other points? as already shown there in the slide. Any other point is just an isolated point. In fact, every point of S, by the way, every point inside S is just an isolated point. You cannot join them to each other. Okay, they are disconnected to each other. There's no path you can take. There's no continuous path you can take to go from one to another point. So you can draw small enough neighborhoods, right? For instance, 1/2. You can draw a small enough deleted neighborhood, not including 1/2. That does not contain any other point. So with 1/3, no matter how small, okay, we can always find a smaller epsilon so that that epsilon neighborhood does not contain other points of S. Question? Only 0 has that property. Okay. Let's define now open and closed sets. Are you still here? Okay. Cameras, please. Open sets and closed sets. Now, since we have defined, okay, neighborhoods, and we have defined interior points, exterior points, limit points, okay, and others, boundary, we are now ready to give topology to the field of real numbers. So first we begin with sets that are defined to be open. What is an open set? A set S is open if every point of it is an interior point. In high school, we were just told that this is an open interval. Okay, all numbers between A and B except A and except B. And that's it, right? So there's a problem with that. Okay, once you really analyze that definition and go down to the fundamentals, then it's not a well-defined uh, object in mathematics. Just simply saying like we remove the endpoints. But rigorously, a set S is open if every point of it is interior to it. No point is an exterior point, okay? No point is actually a boundary point, then every point would be an interior point. Well, some could be limit points, but they could not be exterior nor boundary point. Bakit hindi pwede yung boundary? Because, remember, kapag boundary point, it will contain every neighborhood contains what? Points inside the set, points outside the set. Okay? Lalo na yung exterior point. There is at least one neighborhood that lies outside the set. For S to be open, every point must be inside or an interior point. Okay? How about close? Well, we don't have like a straightforward definition like for open sets, but we simply define a closed set to be the complement of an open set. Okay? If its complement is open, then that set is considered or defined to be a closed set. O back tayo sa alam natin sa real numbers, no? So halimbawa, this point here, right, is open. The complement in R is this. So that's a closed set. Okay? As long as its complement is closed or is open, sorry, then it's a closed set. The complement of this is an open interval. How about A infinity? Is this a closed set? Is it closed? Its complement is this. And it's an open set. But why is it an open set? It's an open set if every point is an interior point. And that's true, right? Any point in it, you draw any epsilon neighborhood, that neighborhood, or a small enough neighborhood, that neighborhood will be contained inside the set. Remember, this is not part of it. If it were closed, right, then this would not be open. That is no longer open. So in other words, the complement of this set is an open set. So therefore, it is closed. Okay, I should not have done that with the views. Okay. So, yeah, bear with me here. Sorry. With the views switch. Okay. Okay. Open and close sets there. So there, an open set if every point is interior, an interior point. Closed set if the complement is open. But they are not opposites, okay? It doesn't mean that open and closed are strict opposites. Yes, though. If the complement is open, it is closed. But the complement of an open set may not be necessarily closed. There are actually sets that are open and closed. What we call clopen, open and close. Okay? Like R itself. R is the whole real line. What is it? Why is this open? Because any neighborhood, actually, not just one neighborhood, every neighborhood of a point is inside R. Any neighborhood, you just need one, but any neighborhood is inside R because R is the whole thing, right? The whole set. So R is open. Now let's find its complement. What is the complement of R? The empty set. And by technicality, since it contains nothing, it doesn't violate, okay, the condition for being a closed set. Okay? So, or sorry, for being an open set. Actually, empty set is an open. It is a closed set. Dapat inuna ko to. because there's nothing that it violates. Why? Because it contains no element. It doesn't violate the definition of an open set. It doesn't violate the definition of a closed set. So it is both open and closed. Now, R is definitely open as shown, but its complement is the null set. And the null set is both open and closed. So it's closed. So R is also closed. Sorry, open. Let me state that again. Although it's also closed, right? Closed too. If the complement is open, okay, then it's closed. R is closed because its complement is open. Its complement is the empty set, which is both open and closed. So it's clopen. Oh, sorry class. Ito yung mahirap sa technology. Okay. So I have to find it again. There. Redo these things. Okay, there are also half open, half closed, or neither open nor closed. So just to be clear, we cannot just divide the type of sets into just two. Okay, not open and closed only. There are sets that are not open and are not closed, like a half open interval. Okay, this one here, sorry. This is not closed, right? Because if you take its complement, the complement is not open because this one's closed. Correct? It's not closed also. Oh, sorry, it's not open also because this one does not is not an interior point, correct? If you draw an epsilon neighborhood, no matter how small you make it will always contain points outside it. It's a boundary point, so definitely it's not an interior point. So it's not closed, it's not open. Careful now. Okay. Okay. So here's what we're going to prove now. We are going to relate limit points and closed sets. So sometimes in analytical or in analysis books, they give this right away to be the definition of a closed set. And that's sometimes what mathematics does. Okay. So some subjects are more advanced. So instead of proving such things, they just state them to be definitions. But let's prove it here. A set S is closed if and only if it contains all its limit points. So it's an if and only if, right? So you have to prove both directions. So let's begin with this direction. Then we'll go to this direction. So we want to prove that the two statements are equivalent to each other. We want to prove that this statement is the same as a set being closed. It contains all its limit points. Let's get the contrapositive done. The contrapositive of that is that no point of its complement is a limit. You negate the negation of the negation, right? So no point of the complement is a limit point, is equivalent to the logically equivalent to the statement it contains all its limit points. So we prove this instead. Actually, in Trench proves this first, then this one as a corollary. So we are essentially doing the same. Only we're using this statement because it's easier to use in the proof. So let's start with the forward direction. So suppose S is closed. What do we want to prove? This is statement. So no point of the complement is a limit point. So we take a point in the complement. We want to prove no point in the complement is a limit point. So consider any point on the complement. What do we want to prove? This is not, okay, a limit point. Let's set go about that. Now, complement. What can we say about it? It's open by definition, right? Since S is closed, by the very definition of a closed set, its complement is open. So actually, you should state that first. Since S is closed, by definition, S complement is open. Okay, to be rigorous, so that there's no gap, okay, in your logic. And since S complement is open, by definition, by the way, what does this mean? Okay, S complement open, X naught is part of it, an element of it. So it's an interior point. So you may want to write that down. Since S complement is open, by definition, X naught is an interior point. Meaning, there, you have this. There is a neighborhood of X naught contained or entirely contained. Pareho lang yon. So, contained in S complement. Okay? Kasi interior point siya. So, meron kang mapapalibot na neighborhood sa kanya na talagang nasa loob ng set S complement. Okay? And because this neighborhood is entirely in the set, which is S complement. Anong ibig sabihin nun? S and S complement, ano sila? Diba? Disjoint. Correct? So let's say this is S. So this is S complement. X naught nandito. S is closed. So by definition, this is open. Since it's open, every point of it is what? Interior point. And because it's an interior point, by the definition of interior point, we can surround it by a neighborhood such that the neighborhood is entirely inside the complement. And since it's the complement, it's obvious now, it should be clear now that this does not contain any point of S. So what does that imply? It is not a limit point. Okay? Paano ba siya nagiging limit point? Ano yung limit point? Every neighborhood contains a point of the set? X naught is a limit point if every epsilon neighborhood contains a point of the set other than X naught, deleted neighborhood, di ba? Doon lang siya nagiging limit point. But this one here does not contain any point of this. So it cannot be a limit point. Okay, yun yung reasoning behind. Para siya maging limit point, dapat bawat neighborhood na nakapalibot kay X0 may point dito. Pero dahil nga open si S complement, hindi pwedeng mangyari yon. And therefore, hindi siya pwedeng maging limit point. So by implication, it's not a limit point. And therefore, this is S is closed. Or rather, no point of S complement is a limit point. We have just proven that. Now, of course, sometimes it takes a little absorption. Okay? Sometimes, kahit na obvious, nakakalito. So, you have to go over the proof several times. So, let's look at the backward or reverse direction. So, dito tayo mag-start. So, suppose that is true, that no point of S complement is a limit point. So, what's the implication? The immediate implication. Every point, okay, of S complement must have a neighborhood contained entirely in S complement. Okay? Because no point of S complement is a limit point of S. Okay? Hindi siya limit point ni S. Okay? So if it's not a limit point of S, there must be a neighborhood that is completely contained in S complement. So parang pinaglalaruan natin yung definition, di ba? So what does this mean? Therefore, S complement is open. Kasi contained siya sa loob ni S complement, no? Okay? It's contained in S complement. So by definition, S complement is open. And if S complement is open, by definition, S is closed. Okay, dito natin one more time. No point of S is a limit point. Of S, or sorry, no point of S complement is a limit point of S. Walang point dito sa green ang limit point ng S. Okay? So since it's not a limit point, okay, any point is not a limit point, we can surround it with an epsilon neighborhood that lies entirely inside S complement, making it open. And if it's open, then by definition, its complement is closed. The complement of the complement is the set. Okay? So those two are equivalent statements. So we can sometimes just define a set as closed if and only if it contains all its limit points. And we close with this. The derived set. The set of all limit points of S. If you combine all the limit points of S, then that set is the derived set. For instance, if S is the open interval 0, 1, what are the limit points? All the interior points and the boundary points. And a while ago, we showed that the only limit point of this set is 0. So that's the derived set. It contains only one limit point. The closure, finally, you just append the derived set to the original set. Okay? So it's just like adding all its missing boundary and accumulation points. Okay? And take note that the closure S is always a closed set because it contains all its limit points. Okay? By definition. So halimbawa, no? Say AB. C. Then can you give me, so S is A closed, B open, union C. Can you give me the derived set? Derived set is just the limit points. C is not the limit point. How about the closure? It's the set plus its limit points. Q, can you give me the derived set of Q? What are the limit points of the set of rational numbers? Anyone? Quickly. For recitation. Real numbers. Bakit may question mark pa? Hindi na considered tuloy. Tama naman. No? Real numbers. All real numbers. Sir Tadeo. And yun na rin yung closure. Okay? So actually, to make a set complete, okay, sometimes all you have to do is close it. In topology, we can make an incomplete ordered field or an incomplete space complete by putting in the closure. Okay, adding the closure of the set. So that's it for today. We'll meet again on Tuesday and wait for any update regarding if there's going to be a quiz or what the topics will be on Tuesday next week. So let me end the meeting. So
Bye, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Bye, sir.